Why should we not lay up treasures on this
Bring
earth?
all the tithe to the storehouse.
For we brought nothing into the world, and it is certain that we can carry nothing out. No one can serve two masters. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. He who loves silver will not be satisfied. Earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, even the people. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Hello and welcome to Faith and Finance. The program today is going to be talking about developing a spending plan. We call it a spending plan because people don't like the idea of a budget. For many people, a budget is the same as going on a diet, and it's not very interesting to them. So we just talk about a simple spending plan, how to live within it. The Bible actually gives an indication that whenever you do something with your money, you should sit down first and figure out how you're going to do it. Luke, the 14th chapter and verse 28 tells us, "For which of you, intending to build a tower," and that's in our situation it would be a house, "does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it." So we're basing our program on the book Faith and Finance, and I have a copy here that I want to show you. It's Financial Planning with a Faith Factor. So we're using biblical principles for personal money management. We also have the book in Spanish called Fe y Finanzas, and these books are available at the Adventist Book Center, and you'll be able to see their 800 number on the screen. Today we look at something that's very fascinating, and that is that in the past, people could pretty much count on what they were going to do with their money. But researchers now warn us of a looming financial disaster for today's young adults. It's common for young people to struggle after finishing school, but the situation is that according to researchers, the problem that they experience those early lean years may never give way to financial stability and prosperity that were enjoyed by their baby boomer parents. The reason? Because of overspending. So there are a number of things that cause the financial picture today to be very, very serious, and I'd like to address some of those as we begin today. The first one is student loans. Student loans are very, very serious situations and can cause great problems for people through their lives. I recently counseled a lady who was 70 years old, but she still owed $40,000 on her student loan. In her case, she had gone back midlife or mid-career, if you please, to do a master's program, and she was able to get a government-backed student loan to pay for her expenses and her living expenses, but now she's so far in debt with it, she'll never live long enough to pay it back. We also discussed credit cards, and for many people, they have many credit cards, and it's not uncommon for people to have 10 or 15 credit cards, many of them store brands and so on. We'll talk about that later. Another one is wage stagnation. In other words, people are working at the same rate, the same income, but the cost of living is going up, as we recently experienced with the price of gasoline and so on. Another real serious concern to people in America is the rising cost of health care and housing. Housing costs a lot because credit is available. But when credit is not available, sometimes the market goes down a little bit, but not much. And then, of course, we have the disappearance of pensions. And, people plan all their lives to have a pension. And, of course, the additional cost of maintaining a household. These factors lead to delayed entry into marriage for young people and parenting, and a widening gap between the rich and the poor. Sticking to a budget means financial discipline today for the sake of your well-being in the future. Many will have to break the habit of dining out at expensive restaurants, buying new cars every 2 or 3 years, and spending $3 or more for smoothies or hot drinks while they're shopping. In other words, we just need to get over that and to understand we need to be more frugal the way we live. So financial planning is designed not to prevent the enjoyment of life, but rather to help you obtain the things that you want and need. So let's start at the beginning. One of my favorite verses, we're going to give just a quick spiritual foundation, then we're going to look at the spending plan, and I think you'll appreciate seeing its simplicity and its thoroughness. We've looked at Proverbs 3, 5 to 10 before, but King Solomon, remember his book in Proverbs, is not so much about right and wrong as it is about wisdom and foolishness. So he's talking about good counsel, and especially in regard to money management. So Proverbs 3 verse 5 begins, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him," and that would include the management of our money. "And if we do that, He will direct our paths or give us wisdom." So don't be wise in your own eyes, Solomon continues. "Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones." If we do that, verses 9 and 10 of Proverbs 3 give a conclusion that I think is very appropriate for today. "Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine." Now that's the way the Bible says it even in the New King James Version, because Solomon was writing to people who by and large were farmer types. But whatever we do, God says, "I'm going to bless the work of your hands and you're going to have plenty to take care of your needs." It's not because God needs the money, but rather because He wants to bless us, that He asks us to put Him first. And then we have that faith reaction to us. Christ Himself reiterated the management principle by putting God first in His own life. In fact, in Matthew 6, we read this yesterday, we talked about, or another time, we talked about God tells us not to worry about what we will eat or drink or wear, but when we seek Him first, He will provide the things that we need. So a budget will provide us with basic information and allow us and help us to live within our income, spend our money wisely, reach our financial goals, and also prepare for financial emergencies and develop a wise financial management plans. These are things to begin the process. So let's start the process of our budget. Here's some things. There are 4 phases, I think, for budgeting. The first thing you want to remember is that you must assess your current situation. And we do that with the balance sheet. Earlier in the book, Faith and Finance, you've already talked about a budget and a balance sheet, but you'll be able to see that's the very beginning. What is the current situation? What is the state of your present financial picture? The second thing is you create your budget percentages and allocations. Now you'll note that the budget page in this segment for the program that we're doing on budgeting and the financial plan is only 1 page. And instead of saying your income needs to be this level, it just divides it up in percentages. So after tithe and taxes, you begin the process of making good faith estimates of what your percentages will be. The third thing that we will look at as far as the budgeting phase is once you've set up your budget, you begin to monitor your spending and saving and investment patterns. And then finally, either quarterly or annually, review your financial progress and revise your budget as relates to income and needs as they change. So how do we figure our income? Well, it's difficult for some people if it's a sporadic income, but if you get paid once a month, planning is easy since you work with a single income amount. But if you get paid bi-weekly or every 2 weeks, your spending plan can be based on 2 monthly paychecks. Then during the 2 months each year that you have 3 paydays, then you can put the additional amounts into savings, pay off some debts, or use them to make a special purchase of some item that you need. But if your earnings are seasonal and your income is irregular, then you have to attempt to estimate your income based on your past and, of course, what you expect to see in the current year. Whatever the case, your income needs to be, there has to be an income stream for you to make a budget at all. So you can estimate your income on the low side, I would recommend, and that will help you avoid overspending and other financial difficulties. So once you have your income decided, we're ready to look at expenses. And I talk about, first of all, the set-aside and saving type expenses. I really don't think of tithe as an expense, but in the sense of a simple budget, it would be on that side. Tithe is listed first in the expense category because it's a deduction from our income that's set aside as holy and belonging to God. offerings are also an expression of our gratitude to God's blessings, and we should give our offerings for things we believe will help others and help to advance the cause of God. And the way our family figures our offerings, we actually take a percentage, like the tithe percent, and write it down and get ready to send it out. And then it's only occasionally that we add to that for special things that we want to do to help others or special causes. So I want you to understand something very interesting. The next item on the budget is taxes. And I want to warn you, do not get sucked into the scam of not paying taxes. It's very incredible that these things happen. It's really interesting that the notorious gangster of the 1920s in America, Al Capone, with the forensic evidence that we have available today, was likely responsible for the death of over 50 individuals. But his longest prison time, more than 6 years spent in the federal prison at Alcatraz, was based on a conviction for tax evasion. Now, people will always come to you and they'll tell you all kinds of unusual things. I read this book that somebody wrote, and you don't have to pay taxes. It's not mandated by the Constitution and all of that. And those things should be discarded, and really you don't want to go down that path. I tell people typically these kind of people write their second book from jail. And so you don't want to get in that at all. As a matter of fact, recently I was aware of a former pastor who began operating as a tax consultant, but he has agreed now to plead guilty on charges of advising others to evade taxes, and he's facing up to 5 years in federal prison and a fine of $250,000. By the way, 2 of his clients were medical doctors, and they failed to file timely income tax returns, and they too are facing fines and, of course, all their back taxes, and you just don't want to get involved in that. The Bible indicates that we should be faithful. Someone came to Jesus one day and they said, do your disciples pay taxes? Or should we pay tax to Caesar or to God? He says, give me a coin. And they did, and he said, whose picture's on it? And well, it was Caesar's picture. So then Jesus said, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. Now, we should practice tax avoidance. If you're smart, you want to use all the deductions that are due you, which means you would take advantage of all these deductions, and tax deference. However, we should never practice tax evasion. Jesus told us in Matthew 21 that, it's chapter 22, verse 21, to render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. The next category is savings. By the way, the lack of significant savings is a major factor in America's debt crisis. I've mentioned on this program before that there are 2 major things that cause problems in America today. One is greed and the other one is debt. And the lack of savings, of course, causes debt. A common budget mistake is to spend the amount that's left over at the end of the month, and this often leaves nothing for savings. So I think that the wise financial advisors suggest that you actually budget an amount for savings every month. Anytime you get some income, save a little bit of it. That will be value to you. How much should you save? Well, I would say 3 months emergency fund is probably adequate for a person with a stable income and not a lot of debts, or he has a secure employment position. But with someone with an erratic or seasonal income, they may need to set aside more than that in their emergency fund, maybe clear up to 6 months or more of living expenses. Those are important. They can do that by setting aside a little bit every year. And I can tell you that vacations also frequently cause people to use credit cards for safety and convenience, but when they get back home, they have to pay these things, and frequently they take a whole year to do it. Why not save a little bit every month? So even if you use your credit card while you're on vacation, when you come back, you can pay it off all at one time. The next category that I will address in the program is fixed expenses. Fixed expenses. And homeowning, if you're a homeowner, you have property taxes to pay. And in many places, this is very expensive, and it only comes once a year. So it can be a substantial hit on your budget, if you please. I have seen personally property taxes that range from a low of around $500 a year to over $25,000 a year just for a residence inside a very costly neighborhood, depending on the size, of course, and the location of the home. So you have to set aside some money, probably about 1/12 of the estimated amount each month, to cover the cost of the bill when it comes due. Another item that I would suggest is with regard to automobiles, just plan on spending money for transportation. And I would say that once your car is paid off, when you've made your time payments, don't stop paying, but simply redirect the money into your savings account so that when it's time to buy a new car, you have the money available to make a cash purchase. By the way, cash purchases for automobiles are quite rare, and I've practiced this myself for several years, the last several cars that I've bought. And typically when you get ready to buy, the salesperson will tell you all the different kinds of options that you have, certain percent for so many years or a different percent for many years, and so on. And we'll talk more about that, but my suggestion is pay cash if you can, or pay it off as quickly as possible. Another one that we will address is insurance. Now, this is part of your budget. It's kind of an interesting thing. Insurance is part of what financial planners call risk management. You pay a fee to a company to provide you with an insurance policy so that in the event there is a loss or an accident or some injury, you can be made whole again. Now, the idea is you're not ticked off at the end of your life when you say, I never did get to use my homeowner's insurance. That's the whole idea. You don't want to use it, but if you need it, it's there available. And that's why we say it's risk management. Assume for a moment that your house is paid off. The loan bank company, the mortgage company does not require you to keep insurance on your home anymore. But would it be a wise idea to drop the casualty insurance? What if a lightning strike hit your electricity and came into your house and caught it on fire and burned it down? If you didn't have insurance, you just lost your greatest asset and probably for most people the most expensive thing they own. So you want to continue with casualty insurance, and obviously you want something that will cover the basic needs for your insurance. People ask about life insurance as a part of their investment portfolio. My personal feeling as a financial counselor is that you should not think of it as part of your investment portfolio, but think of it as risk management. Purchasing insurance is not a sign of lack of faith in God. Many advisors say that you shouldn't consider life insurance a part of your investment portfolio, but rather as risk management. If the primary breadwinner, if you're in debt and you have children, remember I talked to you about the 3 phases of life. We've looked at that in another program, the learning years, the earning years, and the returning years. In that middle part, when you're paying for your schooling, if you have student loans, when you're buying your house and buying your cars and educating your children and so on, if the primary breadwinner were to lose his life, then obviously it would leave the rest of the family in a pretty serious lurch. So if you ever need insurance, life insurance, that would be the time. And you can get a simple term policy to cover that period of your life. Remember I said term insurance, which is just pure life insurance, not an investment vehicle. Most people would think of whole life or universal life insurance as not a good investment. You can do better in other investment vehicles, but just get simple insurance that would cover and protect your family in the event of an untimely death. Sometimes people ask, well, how much should you get? And the idea is there are good rules of thumb to use, and I'll suggest one for you. Sometimes the policy can be figured using an easy method, and it's based on the typical family and their needs. Approximately 70% of what the main breadwinner's salary would be for a 7-year period. So you can figure that out, 70% of an annual income for the main breadwinner, multiply that 10, and that should be enough to give consider all the financial consequences of the person's death and putting the family on an even keel until they can reorganize and go on about their life. And some people ask me about what about long-term care insurance. The insurance industry, of course, is trying to push that, but I have found in my study that most advisors do not recommend purchasing long-term care insurance. Now, obviously, you need to make your own choice about this, but here's the reason that they say it's probably not a good idea, because you could make a better investment of the money, for one thing. Statistically, we understand that 86% of men and 69% of women never need long-term care. My own father passed away of a heart attack. My wife's father passed away of a massive stroke. Neither one spent a day in a nursing home. The point I'm going to tell you here is there is only a 4% chance that those who do require long-term care will need to remain in a nursing home for longer than 5 years. It's better, I think, to self-insure, put the $3,000 a year, that's the typical premiums for someone in their 50s, into an emergency fund, or use the money to pay off your home mortgage faster, and then that equity in your home can provide for your senior years. Another area that we will look at is variable expenses. These are a little harder to determine, but variable expenses is actually budgeting something for things that you're not expecting or that might fluctuate over time. Health, for example, economic conditions, and a variety of other factors may adjust this, but a good guide is to compare what you spent on these items last year and at least project that much. The most common overspending areas are entertainment. These are flexible things that you can do something about. You really can't do a whole lot about your home mortgage, for example, except pay it off, or your home taxes and so on, but you can do something about these variable things. Especially, I was talking about food away from home meals, purchasing less expensive brand items, buying quality use products, avoiding credit card purchases. These are common things that you can do to adjust this area of your budget. So how do you develop a successful budget, or what does it actually look like? Here's what I would suggest. Merely having a spending plan will not eliminate financial worries. A budget works only if you follow it. Changes in income and expenses and goals will require you to change your spending plan. But at least you have a budget that you can modify, and it's written down so that both you and your spouse, if you're married, can look at it together and you can understand how that does it. So money management experts advise that successful budgets should have 4 characteristics. They should be well planned. In other words, you don't just write it down, well, let's put this here and let's put that there and so on, but you say, here's what we did last year. In fact, the budget that we have in the book has 3 columns. Based on your income, there's a suggested percentage, but you could also, there's also a column for what are you currently doing, what should it be, and then where's the area that you need to work on. So you really need to plan it out. And as I've mentioned in other programs, the person, the spouse, if you're married, the one who has the greatest interest in budget or the best aptitude for it should be the one that will do it. Another interesting thing I would tell you is that some couples will come to me and they'll say, well, he's not doing, or his income only provides for this and her income provides for that. And I remember seeing one couple, the lady was driving a very nice car and the man was kind of in a dumpy car. And I asked them, what's the story here? And they said, well, that's all he can afford on his income. I understand, and remember, we're talking about biblical principles of money management. The Bible is very clear that when people get married, they become, you remember, one. So you merge your finances, and the one who's the best manager is the one who will take care of it. So it's well planned, and I would say a merged one too. You may not merge a business operation in with your personal, but I think that both incomes should be into one and let one manage it so you always know where you're doing and you can work together on your goals. The second point that I'll mention is be realistic. In other words, some people say, well, I don't have enough money for all these items, so I'll leave off clothes. But in our society, you need to wear clothes. So you're going to have some kind of a budget for clothes. So be realistic about it. And it's not like you're never going to eat out, you're never going to have any recreation, or never any entertainment. You might cut back in that area, but you need to budget something there. The third point is be flexible. And this one is real difficult, especially if one of the people in a marriage situation, for example, is very rigid. We just don't have any money for that. If there's an opportunity to save a good amount on something that you will actually need, maybe the budget needs to borrow from another account for that particular one. But then the finally one is clearly communicated, and that means written down. If there are children in the family, it would even be well to include them in it so they can understand how the budget works and how the family doesn't just buy everything it sees that it wants, but there's budgeted items that go on. The Bible encourages savings and storing for the future. Do you understand the difference between savings and hoarding? It's very interesting that the Bible encourages saving. In fact, the Bible upholds the ant, the little creature on the ground, several times. Consider the ant. And though they have no overseer, they gather in the summer and store up for winter and so on. Savings is saving for a purpose, like savings for your down payment to buy a house, or saving for your children's education, or saving to buy a car. Hoarding, on the other hand, is saving for security. And if you're saving for security, you really never have enough. So the best way for many of us to save is to arrange for a certain percentage of each paycheck to be automatically deducted for savings and retirement accounts. Because if you don't see it, you won't spend it. That's what we do. We have some of our money taken out every month, straight away from our check, straight to the credit union, so that we'll have money for emergencies, money to pay taxes, and our savings account as well. I would suggest for every person who thinks about a budget to actually pray for God's guidance as you develop your budget, making Him first. He's your partner in this process. Keep your budget and your balance sheet in your file that's easy reference to look at. When you look at a budget situation, the whole chapter in the book Faith and Finance explains how to do the budget. And every detail that you could think about is outlined there. And I think that you'll find it to be to your advantage to go through this. Remember that a budget is not to restrict you, but rather to train you and to be a guide for your family in knowing what to do with the income, and also knowing where your outcome goes. Frequently, when people come to me, they will say, well, you know, we make a good income, but we just don't know where it all goes. And I will ask them, well, do you think somebody's stealing from you or something? And they'll say, no, we make a pretty good income, but we just don't know where it goes. So my suggestion to people, write it down. Even if it's very simple, you can do that. And then both people know what's going on. Occasionally, I see people where either husband or wife will spend money secretly that the other one doesn't know about. That's a bad idea. Really, if you love the person and you want to work out with them your life together, and you want your life to be successful, what you need to do is to work on this together. It'll be a pleasant thing for you to go through life together and to prepare also for the final years of your life, what I call the returning years, when you should be debt-free, your children's education is paid for, and you have the things that you need, including savings for emergency. This is a very interesting situation when you see God's counsel is, when you want to build a house or do something special, sit down and count the cost to see if you have enough to do it. So budgeting is actually your friend. It will allow you to do the things that you want to do, to buy the things that you need, even to set aside things for special things, and to provide for emergencies especially, because they will always come to us. And think in terms of your spending plan as something to guide you to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish in life. And I pray for you God's wisdom and blessing as you set up your own financial plan.